November 1980, we saw the release of Steely Dan's Gaucho album. It would be the last album until 1999-2000 when they came together and released Two Against Nature. This is an incredible album. Currently, I go back and forth. Currently, it is my favorite Steely Dan album. And I've done several Steely Dan videos in the past, and I thought, you know what? I think we need to just have a dedicated video talking about Gaucho. And I've cherry-picked some factoids and some ideas to talk about today. And I'm also going to talk about a few pressings that I have and how amazing I think they sound. And I am looking forward to the UHQ art that's going to be coming out near the end of the year, I believe. But let's talk about the creation of this album, why I think it's pretty unique in their catalog, and also why I think it's an essential Steely Dan title that everyone should have in their collection if you are a Steely Dan fan, and I'm pretty sure anyone watching this video is going to be a Steely Dan fan, so I'm preaching to the converted, as they say. First of all, I think the cover, it's understated, it's gorgeous, it's mysterious. What the hell is Gaucho? Who the hell was Gaucho? Check out some of the song lyrics on this album. This is the pinnacle of the creative partnership up to that point between Donald and Walter. It's just simply amazing. The record includes only 7 songs, 37 minutes of music. Over 40 musicians were used during the recording of the record. The recording took almost 2 years to be completed. At that point in time, it was the most expensive record ever made. And of the 42 or so musicians that were called in for sessions, only 17 are credited in the heavy cardstock liner notes. And this is a glorious document right here with the full lyrics to these songs. I'm just going to cut right now to the title track, Gaucho, and read one passage. Who is the Gaucho, amigo? Why is he standing in your spangled leather poncho with the studs that match your eyes? Bodacious cowboys, such as your friend, will never be welcome here, high in the Custer Dome. There are numerous articles, and there are published books, and there are podcasts, and there are magazine articles that you can peruse and try to determine what Fagen and Becker were thinking about and what that song Gaucho is about. One thing we do know that's really interesting about Gaucho, they ripped off Keith Jarrett, and it is blatantly obvious. If you take a look at the Belonging album from 1974, we are looking for track Long As You Know You're Living Yours. Take a listen to that track, the first 45 seconds or so, and then listen to the opening 45 seconds, a minute of Gaucho, and you will see clear as day that Donald lifted everything from Jarrett's composition. And Donald Fagen admitted, and Becker was part of the interview as well, he admitted as well, in an interview with Musician Magazine that you can find online, the transcript to the article. The person doing the interview point blank asked them if they had ever heard long as you know you're living yours by Keith Jarrett. And at first, I think Becker said no. But they eventually said yes. Fagen actually said, hey, I think it was very influential in the writing of the song. Now, to be fair to Donald and Walter, they take that song in many different directions, and it's totally different than the Jarrett song in question. But that first 45, that opening stanza and piano vamp that Tom Scott kind of replicated on sax in the opening beginning of Gaucho, there is no mystery here. It was definitely lifted. There's an interview out there on a podcast from 2019 with Fagen, and he recalls the recording of Gaucho that I'm going to get into in a minute. It was a torturous session to get that song completed and done. But Fagen and Becker left the studio at midnight. We'll talk about the recording schedule in a minute. This was something else. Anyway, they left the recording sessions at midnight and left Gary Katz and most of the players there to see if they could maybe pull something together that would be usable. Now, there are interviews with Steve Kahn and Rob Mounsey out there. Steve Kahn, the guitarist on one of the guitarists on Gaucho, and Rob Mounsey, very gifted keyboard piano player. He did some horn charts as well for Steely Dan. He also did some work on Asia for them. I think he worked on the Nightfly as well. They are saying that. All right, let's backtrack. The recording sessions for the album typically were in New York. That's where most of the work occurred. And they had a set schedule of 12 noon, a 12 noon start, and a midnight ending point. And they would have a dinner break around 5:30 or 6 in the evening. And they would work on one or two tracks daily during the sessions. There were a lot of interruptions during the recording sessions due to Walter Becker's issues at the time. He was heavily addicted to heroin at the time. He had personal issues. He was hit by a taxi cab on the Upper West Side. His girlfriend was found dead in his apartment. On and on and on. And he wasn't physically present for a lot of the recording sessions. He eventually did do the completed bass line on Gaucho. They actually ended up erasing Anthony Jackson's bass track. Back to the actual session, Donald and Walter were not getting what they were looking for. And to the frustration of the musicians there, because they thought, man, we're nailing this song and it sounds amazing. They completed over 20 complete takes between 12 noon and what eventually ended up being 4 o'clock in the morning. And about 2 days later, Gary Katz called Rob Mounsey and told him, hey, great news. Donald and Walter think that they're going to be able to, they've got something that they can use. And it turns out what they were after was just a perfect drum track from Jeff Porcaro. And eventually they got that, and then they worked back. They had all the players come back, replicate their parts, and eventually spliced in everything, punched in everything to its completed, it's called a comp track when you're taking different parts from different sessions and forming a composite track out of it. That's what happened with Gaucho. Absolutely amazing. 16 hours of recording. to come up with what is justifiably true, an amazing composition. I don't care if they took the opening riffs from a Keith Jarrett song or not. It is an amazing piece of work. Back to the OCD nature of Fagen and Becker at that time. Babylon Sisters, the amazing opening song on side one. Bernard Purdie, legendary drummer, he nailed the opening stanza in two takes. But what eventually ensued with the mixing of that song, Donald and Walter and Gary Katz and Elliot Shiner and, of course, Roger Nichols, they worked on over 250 mixes of Babylon Sisters before they finally agreed on the released version. Mind-blowing. There's a reason this record was the most expensive that was ever made up to that point. I think it was north of $750,000. So if you go and Google $750,000 into some kind of a calculator compared to today's money, you're going to be amazed at what you see. The 7 songs on the record were Babylon Sisters, just an incredible tale. Just one of the best songs ever recorded by Steely Dan. An incredible opening track. Hey 19, Glamour Profession. Glamour Profession is amazing. It's basically about a drug dealer. And just incredible chord changes. Rob Mounsey actually delivered a great piano solo at the end of the mix down of that song. Fagen thought they needed a piano solo and brought in Rob Mounsey to do that. And then asked him also to add some flourishes, throughout the song, because you can't just have a piano solo drop in from nowhere. It needs to be supported. So listen to Glamour Profession and some of those piano fills. And the cool thing about that song, and the whole record for that matter, is listen to that mix closely. Everything, it's in its own space. We talk about separation of instruments a lot, us pseudo audiophiles out there. And this is a fantastic representation of what we're talking about. Put that record on and listen to it closely. You're listening for the left-hand channel all the way to the right channel, and you're listening for individual instruments and parts. And do they all have their own space? Yes, they do on this record. It's absolutely amazing. That's why I love this record so much. First of all, the melodies, the songs, the vocals from Fagen, the way that his phrasing is coming across, and he has, how he's deciding to deliver these vocals. Amazing. And yes, the mix is just one of the best mixed albums I have ever heard. Now, the other standout player on this record is Steve Kahn. Now, Steve Kahn, he has the closing kind of ride-out guitar solo that's incredibly tasty on Glamour Profession. And he also has some great soloing in the song I talked about earlier, Gaucho. Famously, they brought in Mark Knopfler because they were in love with the Dire Straits record. And Mark Knopfler, I think, was there for a couple days, and there's a lot of recorded work that they got from him. And on Time Out of Mind, there's like 30 seconds. That is the extent of Mark Knopfler's contribution. There was an interview with him And he said that, that entire experience was like trying to swim in a swimming pool with ankle weights on. Not real complimentary. Talk about the drums. This is some of the most driest drum sounds you will ever hear on a recording. They sound absolutely amazing. Apparently, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker were obsessed with drum sounds, and they were so obsessed that they had Roger Nichols invent basically the first drum machine. It was between Roger Nichols and Lind, the Lind drum, and then Nichols, of course, invented Wendel. And Wendel had some arcane computer language behind it. There's an interview with Fagen, and he said that, Roger Nichols would be typing out several minutes of code to get a single snare hit out of Wendel. But it did work, and, what they used Wendel for is to lay down basic tracks and click tracks, and then eventually they would use live drummers. Steve Gadd, Jeff Porcaro, Bernard Purdy, and Rick Marotta were used for the live drum fills on these various songs. But Wendel was used as basically a timekeeper and to come up with very, very lifelike drum sounds where needed. Let's talk about the actual pressings. I know everyone is looking forward to the UHQR. Apparently, they're going to be using a dub copy from Ludwig's mastering. So basically a copy of the master tape that was mastered by Robert Ludwig. It's going to be on 45 RPM, a double LP. Invariably, you would think that this is going to sound better than what we have right now. This is a very hard bar. This is a very high bar, so I am curious to see what will happen. I am going to have to buy one. I haven't pre-ordered one yet, but we'll be doing that soon because it is supposed to be coming out in the next couple months. I think we're getting Asia very soon as well. I have not pre-ordered Asia. I'm not sure if I'm going to. Okay, I've got 3 pressings of Gaucho. I have an MCA pressing. This has got Europa disc in the dead wax as well, the EDP round stamp, and it has a couple differences from another pressing I'm going to show you. First of all, you can see on the label that the MCA catalog number is just listed as is on the left-hand side of that label. The other pressing that I have actually has the catalog number. The MCA catalog number has parentheses around it. Also, side A, side B. In this case, I have small letters, okay? And then if you look at the label, the credits, the way it's done on the label, check that out in comparison to, I have a Gloversville pressing. You'll see that there are parentheses around the MCA catalog number, and you'll see that the layout of the credits on the bottom under the track listing is a little bit different as well. It also has the EDP stamp, the round oval EDP stamp. I'm going to show close-ups of both of these. But most importantly, both of these have master disc and RL on both sides. RL, of course, for Robert Ludwig. And RL is etched, and sometimes it can be hard to see. It can be faint. The other pressing I have is a reissue, and it was a remaster. I still do not know for sure who cut this, but it is the MCA audiophile pressing, and you'll see that it has a it says it was a half-speed mastered copy. This sounds really, really good as well. I think it sounds a little brighter than these other two pressings that I have, these earlier pressings of the record, the original pressings. This, is not cheap. If you ever do find this out there, there's nothing wrong with it. If you don't have an original, originals, finding those noise-free and in near-mint condition is becoming challenging as the years go on. I'm lucky I actually found another copy yesterday in an antique mall. This guy's particular area or his stall, he had a little sign saying everything is 35% off today or for a certain time. And he had a $20 sticker on that record. So I picked it up for $14 basically. That is a great price. Those are the pressings. And like I said, I am looking forward to the UHQR. I'll do an update and talk about what I think about the sound of that record when it comes out. So I guess in closing, I will just say that I think that Gaucho is really interesting. I think it has a bit of a melancholy feel to it. Oftentimes you'll read reviews of Gaucho and you'll remember, you'll pull out of the review people talking about the record, the sound, and people will say, oh, it's very clinical and it's polished to an incredibly high sheen. I agree. This was basically the end of the road at that point in time for Donald and Walter. Walter's issues had kind of caught up with him. They had, basically forced those guys to realize, and Becker said this in an interview too, at the end of the sessions for Gaucho, they both kind of determined, hey, this really wasn't a lot of fun this time around. And they needed to take a break. They had taken things as far as they could up to that point. And it's well documented. I talked about the OCD nature of the recording. The fact that they used 42 musicians and only 17 made the final cut. The 250 mixes of Babylon Sisters. It goes on and on and on. And the cool thing is, both of these guys came out of this okay. And survived. And, Walter kicked his heroin addiction, which is incredible. There are so many cases of people that was not the case. Musicians, etc. So that's the bright side. But if you listen to this record, it does have a melancholy feel to it. And, something about listening to it, I don't know. I get kind of a sense of closure to that's the end of that chapter for Steely Dan. And they would regroup with Kamakiriad and 11 tracks of Whack, and eventually with Two Against Nature, and they started touring again. It's been an amazing second act, and unfortunately, we lost Walter in 2017. But Fagen is still out there, still, shucking and jiving, and he has an incredible band that he's assembled. And basically, the Steely Dan band today, they can replicate these parts. They all have parts to play to bring these songs to life. And, there's certain improvisational aspects to these songs where they have some space. Everything doesn't have to be A through Z according to the actual recording. The players have got some space to do some improvisational and replicate a solo here or a solo there and put their own kind of spin on things. But that also frees up Fagen to do all kinds of vamping and stuff behind his electric piano that he sits front and center at every Steely Dan gig. He is out of the hospital, by the way, if you haven't heard, and supposedly we'll be picking up dates again with the Eagles sometime soon in early November. My takeaway is, I think it's an incredible album. I think it's my favorite Steely Dan album right now, as I sit here today. It does have a melancholy feel to it, but it is so tasty to listen to that mix and to listen to those vocals and to pour over the vocals and try and make sense of what the hell these guys were talking about. It's an amazing culmination in 1980 of an amazing band. And I'm so happy that we have this art out there in the world. Wow, that sounded really highfalutin. Thanks everybody for joining me. I will be back soon with something different, but I started thinking about Gaucho again and doing some more reading and some more listening. I still have a hard time if I find a near mint copy of Gaucho out in the wild. I have a really hard time not bringing it home, especially if it's priced well. So hopefully you all have a good copy and you're enjoying this too. Take care.